So as I said before, my name is Manuel. You may know me from BazelCon last year if you have seen my videos, or from asking very annoying questions on Slack. I've been at Booking for the last 7 years, and I've been doing Bazel at Booking since 2020, if I'm not mistaken. So this is what I mentioned before. If you wanna walk around the building and see what we have, just register there on that Google form, and then we will guide you around. It's gonna be outside on the screen as well. I'm gonna do this during the conference or during the drinks. So no need for all of you to rush right now. Yeah, so welcome. We created, so this building we opened in May last year. We are very glad to have you here. As Helen said, this all started during last BazelCon in Munich, where I literally started talking to people around the corridor saying, hey, we just opened this building in Amsterdam. Could you be interested in coming if we do a Bazel Day? And to be honest, I didn't realize how much work that will be, but I'm very glad to see you here. I'm very glad to see people from BazelCon. I'm very glad to see former colleagues, current colleagues, people that struggle with our Bazel adoption, people that have helped, and so on and so forth. So a little bit about us, because I think there are two kinds of nerds. There are those that don't live under the bubble and travel and may have heard about Booking before. And there are the other kind of just regular nerds that don't ever get out. So this is a very old screen from our website. I think this is the first version actually. We started in '96. In 2002, we grew to 50 employees. In 2006, we got acquired by Priceline, or now it's actually Booking Holdings. I think, yeah, you have there the numbers. We have like 45 languages. You should put this a bit faster. Yeah, you can read. But I think the most important part is we opened this headquarters in May 2023. And yeah, to be honest, we are very proud of the building. We started doing Bazel. So this is actually not how we do Bazel. This is just to show you how it all started. So in 2002, that's when we have the first multi-tenant large monolithic applications in Perl. If you're asking what happened between '96 and 2002, well, we started, I think, on ASP. Then we moved to PHP, or one of the other, I don't know, remember the order. By 2002, we did the one rewrite into Perl. In 2015, that's when we started doing services in Java in production. And that's the same year that Google open source Bazel. In 2016, that's when we have our very first early commits to the Java monorepo. And by 2017, that's when we started adopting Kubernetes. And well, my Git foo may be a bit outdated, but that's the oldest commit I could find on rule shaving XRL. By 2020, we started adopting Bazel at Booking. Last year, 2023, that's when I presented at BazelCon. And 2024, we are here to host you all here. A little bit of how does our distribution of languages look like. We have a lot of Java, we have a lot of Perl, we have a lot of TypeScript. Someone I was interviewing last week or the week before was asking me if we have any Rust. I don't think we do, but we even have a stuff in Go for internal tooling. And yeah, you can guess a lot of Go for Bazel itself. When it comes to Bazel adoption inside the company, and let's focus only on Kubernetes because that is where Bazel, that's where we're actually using most Bazel. We have an internal service that builds images, and this service can do both Bazel and non-Bazel. So the 48.9 is that managed Docker. The 18.7 is the Bazel builds that we have from the highly critical services that we have. And then the rest is just people messing with Docker and doing their stuff. When it comes to adoption per language for this type of services, Java is our biggest adopter. So we have like 50, well, it's half and half between Perl and Java. How does our landscape look like? So we have a vision, or at least I have a vision, and I think some other people in my track share my vision. Like we want to make it easier for people to do their day-to-day work. And in particular, I want them to be able to say, hey, I'm going to put my code here because it's trivial for me to get started. Somehow that got us into Bazel. By 2020, what some people in our front-end services started realizing when we were doing Java is that if you have to make contributions to like 6, 7 services, and each one of them is on their own repository, then it's very, very hard to get your stuff out. Then we also have issues like SOX compliance. So that is, if you're a public company, then you have to show that all of your changes have been approved by someone. So that's also where Bazel became like a big thing. And yeah, as everyone else, like we only like it is correct builds. Like we hate it. Like I used to own a service that was written in Maven, and literally the first instruction on our deployment on a deployment doc was do ambient clean. Literally, I had an outage because I had 2 versions of Log4j. We love Bazel because it allows us, it's making it very easy for us to have more than one language. It's very common to have like a backend in Java and then some front-end stuff on JavaScript. Or your backend in Perl and then your front-end in JavaScript. Or your backend in Java, your front-end in JavaScript, and then your test in Perl. Don't ask why, but people do this. It's extensible. And I used to have an asterisk here, but actually someone told me, yeah, that doesn't make much sense. But now I remember that asterisk. So the learning curve is high. You can contribute to the rules, even though it's not trivial to get there. But once you can cross that border, actually contributing to the core, well, not to the core, but to the rule set is possible, especially when you compare it to other build systems. As I said before, well, this is mostly, yeah. So kind of to compare how our Bazel adoption happened compared to where the industry was. So 2015, our first Java service is that when Bazel gets open source. 2017, first RuleJVM's external commit and first BazelCon. I remember seeing those videos by 2020 and like be amazed about the people speaking there. It's incredible that it's the second time I'm speaking here. By 2020, we have our first commits. That's the first year that both EngFlow and BuildBuddy started being around. So we started adopting Bazel before there were like industry people or like enterprise providers for stuff like RB and remote caching. 2021, that's when we got the Bazel SIG. 2020 and 2021, you can imagine for the travel company to be a bit hard. There was a small thing happening called COVID. By 2022, there was the first BazelCon back alive in New York. That was a nice and very awesome thing to be there. 2023, that's when we got our Perl toolchain. For our Perl Bazel rules called toolchains. They're still not open source. We have the BazelCon in Munich, and Bazel 7 got released. And like a few weeks before, we finally, in 2024, we were able to adopt Bazel 6. And yeah, turns out if you do distributed monorepo, it's very, very hard to get it properly. So we, as some other big enterprise companies, we use GitLab as our source code and CI provider. Someone that has some colleagues that were coming from Google was telling me, yeah, a lot of people don't want to do GitHub because they're aware, they are afraid that eventually Microsoft will, I don't know, they want to do everything AI and then just kill GitHub. I don't know, we're on GitHub, we're sorry, on GitLab. We're gonna stay there for a while. We use JFrog Artifactory for storing our images, like our container images, but also as a transparent proxy so our CI doesn't talk to the internet. Because yeah, you can imagine you can have outages on your CI because you cannot, like, I don't know, GitHub just throws you down. We also have, we build on Bazel, we publish into our Maven artifact, into our Maven repository. We proxy those as well. We use open source rules from GitHub. We have our forks, we have our patches. Actually, something we started doing when we did all this Bazel 6 migration is to start put more stuff that we had internally into patches. For instance, for the Bazel Sonarchy rules, that hopefully we will eventually be able to start open MRs, but at least we can start making our stuff a bit more decoupled. And we have some remote caching. Actually, we were using Artifactory for that. We had some build event protocol, and we're actually starting to look very heavily into RVE for the future. In terms of Java, we, as much as possible, try to use the open source upstream rules. Again, as I said before, we start to push our patches upstream, well, not upstream, but to our forks in GitHub. That makes it very easy. We have a big repo that we call the monorepo, but it's not a monorepo, where we have like 200 Java libraries that get published to our Maven Artifactory, and maybe like 50 Kubernetes services. Then we have a distributed monorepo, and this is when things get bananas. We have like 100 gig repos hosting 150 Java services. And then we have a lot of more services that are on Maven, but that's out of discussion here. I was the one that created a tool to use migration. And to be honest, that was one of the worst mistakes I made at the company because it actually made people adopt some of the worst practices that now I'm struggling to move back. For instance, I made it very easy to people to adopt a distributed monorepo. And I'm very, very sorry for that. And we also have a tooling to bootstrap Java services. And the default here was, hey, you want to put your service? Just here is your Git repo. Put your service here. Yay, more stuff for the distributed monorepo. When it comes to Perl, questions after. Sorry. We have all of our Perl rules are built in-house. We have toolchain support. We have a package manager that is open source that no one is adopting, but well, we are the largest company doing Perl right now, so whatever. We have a monorepo. It's a proper monorepo. We have some services outside of monorepo that are not on Bazel, so I don't care about them, but we have a proper monorepo. This repo has like 220 Bazel backend services, bucket services out of around 280. So the adoption of Bazel on this repo is very high. Because when we started with Bazel and Perl at Booking, we didn't have a tool chain. We have to get our own tool chain. That is for the 2 versions that we support. We were like, yeah, sorry, we're not going to support. Like some of our developers are using Macs. We were like, sorry, we're not going to support it. It's very hard. If you want to do Perl at Booking on Bazel, you will have to get either a virtual machine or just use Dev Container, which are very, very awesome. RB is very, very hard. I don't want to do this myself anymore. Especially when you have like thousands and thousands of files in your run files. We have 60 to 70,000 files on a single test, and just Bazel just chokes on it. And we have created our own dedicated Bazel CI runners. So these are GitLab runners that connect to our GitLab infra, that have the clone of the repo, have all the disk cache and the repository cache and all of that. And this is actually what we're trying to get to the rest of our setup, because this is how we are actually achieving less than 60 seconds test time on our Perl code. We had Node.js, and this was a failed attempt. This was like when we started doing Bazel at Booking, we went like, yeah, let's do Bazel everywhere. And turns out we didn't have people that were very aware of the tooling to do that. And we were on rules in Node.js until like 1.5 years ago. We didn't move to the rules.js, and the team decided to migrate to NX. Like literally, we were giving them the worst of all of both worlds. We were giving them very bad ID integration, and we were giving them very bad RV or remote caching. They didn't even have that. And yeah, well, I don't blame them for moving out. How did our infra evolve in terms of Bazel? So in the early days, we will have the main repo, the distributed monorepo, and some ephemeral runners. And we will use Artifactory as our remote caching. We didn't have any visibility. And back then, our workspace status file will literally push the timestamp and the Git commit into the cache. And yeah, you can imagine every single commit was a cache miss. And then we were like, yeah, well, JFrog is not working for us because it was also like the amount of load we were putting there was insane. So we tried to start experimenting, and we had a setup that has open source build body for remote build, sorry, not for remote build, for remote caching and the build event protocol, and then build barn for our RBE. All of that is running on our AWS account. We have Envoy in between where our load balancers connect to this Envoy over gRPCs. And something in between, and most likely is our load balancer, is misbehaving, and we see errors on the client side because the gRPC connection just dies. Turns out Bazel doesn't try to reconnect. I don't blame it, it's fine. What we are actually evaluating now is like, hey, can we get like a black box on AWS that we can just move? This is what our current state is. This is what we're testing. And you may be asking, okay, what is the future for you guys? We've been looking at creating dedicated GitLab runners that we haven't open source yet, but I hope we can open source. That is the box on the top there. An RB cluster that we don't own or manage. We just get some vendor to do it for us. On-prem, we will still have our GitLab. And we'll still have our OCI image service that I mentioned in the beginning. And most likely we'll keep having Artifactory for a while. but at least we're gonna start reducing more and more what we do in Artifactory. We had many bloopers while we're adopting. And this is a part where I'm humble and I come to you guys telling, yeah, well, don't do these kind of things. Try to learn from me or from us. We thought without RV, we were a turtle. With RV, we will be super fast. Well, turns out it's not that easy to do RV. Nowadays, it's becoming more and more easier, but it wasn't back then so easy. I think the first time we tried RV, Will correct me if I'm wrong, that's on 2021. Very early in the days. So because we didn't have RV, we did whatever Postman P person will do for RV. We just put it all on GitLab shops and you wind up. So this is a screenshot from our Shabas repo. If we look at our per repo, the number of shops goes to like thousands. And we have squeezed every single bit you can get out of GitLab. Yeah, GitLab is not the right tool for this. And then, oh, I should have put something here. So this is what we got. This is the advantage we got when we enable Project SkyML. So SkyML is a feature, I think was experimental on Bazel 5, still experimental on Bazel 6, but now we are on Bazel 6, we actually adopted, and is fully enabled on Bazel 7, if I'm not mistaken. The most important thing here is the purple things on the top. So the one on the top is the one with no SkyML. The one on the bottom is the one with SkyML. The most important thing is the purple thing, which is the number of action counts that the number of actions that Bazel is processing. Before it was starting at 180 seconds, now it's starting at 10 seconds. So that is a major speed and bump, which is literally just one flag. I myself was not trying to do when I started with Bazel, I was like, oh, this general thing is awesome. I can do everything with it. I'm gonna do it. And then you start like, hey, oops, I cannot disable the caching for this. Fuck. So you have to really get it. So shell rules are fine, but don't use them much. Get familiar with actions. Go very quickly to there. Get familiar. Make sure that if you're writing rules and you have actions, make sure your actions have a mnemonic, because then your user can say, hey, this thingy that is super expensive on I/O time, for instance, building a container image is just taking a bunch of files, putting it on a tar file. Well, maybe you don't want to go over the network for a half a gigabyte artifact that you just have all the artifacts locally. We just put it together and you're done. Yeah, so you can imagine. Early adoption is hard. As I said before, when we started, there were not a single RVE provider out there. And to be honest, we were underestimating how powerful this will be for us. Yeah, the worst thing that you can do is to get a very shitty, sorry for my language, ID integration and a very bad CI. You may end up in a situation where, yeah, sure, Bazel tells you you're gonna get 10x. That's a famous announcement from Bazel. Well, you may not get anything if you're not careful. As I mentioned before, be very careful with your workspace status file. It is possible you are putting your Git commits on your cache key, and then every single one of your Git commits, whenever you rebase or whatever, your entire cache gets invalidated. Or maybe you put your .git directory. We did it as well, and then your entire cache gets invalidated on every single Git operation. Yeah, sorry, you can make mistakes. Yes, writing your own rules or patching rules is awesome, except when you put all of that into your own repo and you have a lot of legacy you cannot move out. It took us 1 year to move from Bazel 5 to Bazel 6 because we literally copied the rules from Bazel Sonar Cube, put it into a repo, and then that thing started deviating. Instead, what you should be doing is, there is this awesome thing on Bazel called HTTP file. There is that awesome button on GitHub that says fork. You fork, you have your change, you just rebase that thing, and you just point to that commit, done. Sure, you still maybe creating legacy, but you may be able to move faster. Yeah, caching will solve your problems until your build is not cached, because every single build has your Git commit. Yes, again, modify execution info. This is where you can save a lot of CI time. The first time we started doing build event protocol, when we started getting visibility, we started noticing, why is this thing downloading 6 gigabytes and then uploading 5 gigabytes? What's insane here? Oh, wait, I can actually disable this thing and never go and push stuff to the cache. But there is a catch with this one. It doesn't accumulate. So whenever you have modified execution info, just put them all in a single gigantic line on your Bazel RC, and whatever new options you put, you just add it there because they don't add up. You may actually think you're adding up, and actually you just end up replacing it all. Be ready to challenge the status quo. This is literally when I was researching rules IBM external a few weeks back. I noticed there was this shell rule that was consuming all my CI time, which is literally copying for every single one of your Maven artifacts. It was doing a CP to the @Maven repository. This was a legacy on rules IBM external. Back then, HTTP file, which is a way for rules IBM external to bring in Maven dependencies, didn't have the option to say, hey, download this thing from the internet or from this other HTTP repository and name it this way. And that thing was all the way back in history to the point where the first commit of rules IBM external had that CP already. We have a patch. We are still struggling with CI to pass on GitHub for this. But the important thing here is with the upstream, oh, and I forgot to mention, we have a lot of Maven dependencies on our repositories. The disk cache on the upstream rules IBM external was like 2.4 gigabytes for our Java 17 build, sorry. And it was only 232 megabytes after the changes we made. So this is a major, hopefully this is a major speed change, or at least we're not gonna spend so much on CI, which is like, yeah, sure, your RB and your CI is super latency bounded. So my point is, yeah, you need to be ready to challenge the status quo. It doesn't, like people on Slack and people on GitHub, they are also developers. They also want to get their stuff better, and they're super friendly. I'm very sorry that Simon couldn't make it today, to be honest. And we had stuff like, hey, why are these builds so slow? For instance, this case, this was a fully cached build. So like, why was this build so slow? And then we start looking at the timing, and like, this is where having introspection in your build is very useful. Can anyone notice what is wrong here? Come on, can anyone notice what's wrong here? No, 32 cores and a single process. So turns out these are running on a VM. I don't know how, but the VM keeps showing that it has 32 cores. Inside the VM, we only have 2 cores. Then we're doing host CPUs time 0.7. Then Bazel says, hey, I'm gonna round up because I cannot just schedule you on 0.7 cores. And then schedule us in a single core. And that is like, oops. Yeah, that was a very holy mother, yeah, holy moly. Another one. Yeah, also like the critical path was super fast, but our lap time was a lot. And the remote cache hit wasn't that big. So like, what's wrong with this build? I don't remember what happened on this one. So I will have to wait for the video to come. I think it's similar actually. It's always something, oh yeah, the same thing. So now I remember. Back then, someone decided that we should only build and test on 4 cores. We started increasing our machines, and they were still running on 4 cores. Until someone last year decided, hey, let's move to 8 cores. And instead of changing the, there is, okay, that's one problem that we, or like everyone on this room is mostly aware of, like the problem with Bazel flags. So there are 2 flags that are very important to modify how many things run in parallel. One is minus shops. That means how many shops you're gonna use for build and test. And then there is another one, which is something like test, something shop, something, which says, hey, how many shops you allowed to run in parallel? So how many tests you allowed to run in parallel, sorry. And instead of, hey, because some of our tests, they collide when they run in parallel, instead of lowering that number, we lower all of the numbers. So every single one of our builds was way, way slower. These are the kind of things that you start getting when you start getting introspection on your builds. Getting visibility, we didn't get this until last year. This was very big moment for us. Yeah, sorry, questions. I have no idea how we go in time, but there was someone there that had a question. Wait. Just take a microphone because they cannot hear you on the recording.
Hi, I was just curious what even distributed monorepo is.
Sorry, I don't get the question.
So there was this term.
Yes.
You have distributed.
Distributed monorepo. What does it mean? That's a good one. Sorry. Let me go back. So basically, what we do is Bazel has this rule called the git_repository. That is, you could think about this as a kind of a Git submodule. And that allows you to say, hey, this repo depends on that commit on that other repo. This is great until people start depending on your internals. And then your monorepo became a distributed monorepo that everyone depends on. And they also depend on the state of you. So you try to bump the Bazel version and you end up breaking it for everyone. Or you change this rule that you say, no one will depend on this. And then you just break it for everyone. And because our CI is so slow, we cannot have, which is something that we expect RB to help with, we don't have like, all right, for every change we make to our Bazel rules, we verify that we don't break these critical services because these people will not be able to roll out. So yeah, that's what we mean with a distributed monorepo. And this is literally like the worst of all of the worlds. I really don't remember when we'll have to start with the next one, but I think it's at 3. I don't have the timeline with me. Okay, anyone? We have time for one more question. No? Okay. Thanks, and where is that one? Oh, there goes. Yeah, so if you are interested, we're hiring. That's the QR code you have there. You can reach me on email. You can find me on Slack. By the way, I have 2 accounts on Slack. One is my personal one, the other one is for work. So if you want to ping me, do it in both because I never check the personal one. And yeah, like if you want to work with us, just also ping me and then I can get you connected with the right people. Thank you so very much.